Genesis of Millennium Running is really the event you alluded to, the Millennium Mile. The Millennium Mile is an event that I created with my best friend from high school, Matt Downen, and his older brother, Andy Downen. Now, the three of us were, this is in 1999, so going to the Wayback Machine. And this gets us to the turn of the millennium, hence Millennium Mile. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the three of us were at a bar in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire, talking about, because, you know, that's what you do when you're a college kid. You come home, you go to the bar, you meet all your buddies again, right?
Hey there, podcast listener. If this is your first time here, welcome to the Eat Half, Walk Double podcast, coming to you from the Ascend Endurance Coaching Studios here in rainy Stratford, New Hampshire, US of A. I'm your host, Chris Dunn. If you follow the show, well, thank you and welcome back. So this show chronicles my 4 decades in endurance sports. As an exercise physiologist, coach, race director, and athlete, told through the stories of the important, influential, and interesting people I've met along the way. While I catch up with friends, colleagues, rivals, clients, and the occasional family member, it's my hope you'll learn a little something about health, fitness, and the secrets to living well along the way. Millennium Running's John Mortimer is my guest this week. When you think of road racing in New Hampshire, you think Millennium Running. Now that's not surprising, considering they have more than 29 signature events, all of which are successful and all of which are a ton of fun. In addition to the events, they also have a brick and mortar running store and a loyal and robust running club. But it's arguable that their philanthropy is perhaps their greatest contribution to the sport of running here in New Hampshire, as they recently surpassed the $1 million charitable giving mark. Well, here he is, John Mortimer. John, welcome to the show.
Oh, Chris, it is an honor to be here, my man.
Well, it's an honor for me to have the opportunity to talk to you. You and I don't get a chance to cross paths very often. In fact, I'm not sure that we've seen each other in person since pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed a nice beverage one time, getting ready for the race season, right? Organizing all the events that you've been a part of, and we are happy to work together on those things.
Yeah, for sure. So it's a great opportunity for me anyway to get a chance to sit down and chat with you a little bit. John, let's open up this way. On New Year's Day, your wife and 2 boys competed in the Millennium Mile, with all 3 of them going under 6 minutes for a finish time.
They did.
John, what was that like for you?
I just try to keep up. I think it is at this point in my life, being in my mid 40s, I have what I said, hashtag fast family. So I think my 2 boys are 2 great kids, very athletic kids with other sports. And, my running background and my wife's running background, we'd like to think they have some pretty good genes for the sport if they love it. And, but it was really fun to see my 2 boys and my wife enjoying the sport that we do as a business and we do as a passion. So to see them run our flagship event, which is the Millennium Mile, an event that we started in 1999, 24 years later, having my kids do it and doing it pretty good, was a lot of fun for me personally. I think it was less fun for my wife, Jennifer, because my wife, Jennifer, who I know, Jennifer Mortimer, formerly Jennifer Kramer, was an Olympic trials competitor in the 5K and school record holder at Boston College. She's won the race many years ago. She's a fast mom. And for the first time, our 13-year-old beat mom. So I'm not, so maybe but he's a good kid, and it was a family showdown, so to speak. So
I guess it was, and I suspect with your youngest being 11 and your oldest being 13, they those times for them likely will continue to fall as they continue to mature and get a little faster. Well, I mean, I know, and you know this to be true, John, that as race directors, as event managers, I mean, these really are family businesses. I mean, they almost have to be, right? Your
sure.
family has to be involved and bought into what you're doing. John, for the listener who doesn't know John Mortimer, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, and again, the pleasure is all mine to be here and talk to you about this stuff. Some fun stuff we'll talk about, running and walking, having some fun and passion with the sport. But again, my name is John Mortimer, and I'm a New Hampshire native. So I grew up here just about all my life. Born down in Pennsylvania and lived in for very, very brief time in Florida. But since the age of 4, I've been a New Hampshireite for a long, long time, minus my years as a collegiate athlete and a professional athlete. I've lived in this great state of New Hampshire for a long time, and it's the place that I came back to raise a family. And now we own a business called Millennium Running, which is a segue from the Millennium Mile. So it's a business that we own and operate here in Bedford, New Hampshire. And I'm the proud dad of 2 boys and a fast wife, and a small family business that we have a lot of fun doing, and we'll get into many of that stuff. But I used to be a runner myself. So I say used to, I jog now. I'm not a runner, I'm a jogger because I'm getting older and slower. But enjoy the feeling of getting out there and getting the sweat in, and that runner's high you get when you get out there and exercise, because no one ever regretted taking that first step, right?
Yeah, true. Yeah, I always used to bristle when someone would refer to me as a jogger. For me, right? For me, I think the difference between runners and joggers is this: that joggers will go running only when the weather is perfect. Runners run in any weather. So I think it has less to do with how fast or how slow you are. I think it has more to do with how committed you are to the sport. And if you're willing, we're having this conversation at just the opening of the winter, but winters here in New Hampshire can get cold and dark and sometimes rainy or icy or snowy. For folks that are out there running, in those types of conditions, no matter how fast or how slow you are, you're a runner, not a jogger.
Yeah, 100%. Well, and we've done surveys and Instagram and Facebook comments or posts that incited comments. And at the end of January, we say, how's the New Year's resolution of running more going? And people say, I've run 4 miles, and one of them is our Millennium Mile, next is our Snowflake Shuffle, and they didn't run in between those. So they're your joggers maybe, or your weekend warriors. But the fair weather runner is something that too many people are, and we hope to inspire them to jog a little bit more sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So you and I had the opportunity to meet a few years back when my event management company, Acidotic Racing, hired your company, Millennium Running, to time several of our events. Not
just any events, Chris. I mean, some of these events were the national championships. So they're not just some little 5K. These are national championships that go up mountains.
That's fair. You of course are referencing the Loon Mountain Race, an event that we previously managed, but no longer manage. Yes, you folks were there to time that event. As you talk about Millennium Running as sort of being a relatively small business here in New Hampshire. Millennium Running is anything but small with respect to your impact and your reach. For us, Acidotic Racing, we're very much a niche business, only hosting now a handful of events every year, and they're off-road events. So we're we're talking, 50 to 150 people, right? Small events. For those small events, those are easy for us to hand time. I have the hand timing equipment, and we can do that. But anytime we're expecting more than 200 participants, we have to subcontract that out. We have to hire the professionals. We have to hire the folks from Millennium Running to come in and time those events, because there's no way that we were going to attempt to time at that point the Loon Mountain Race, in which we anticipate, your point, it was the national championship, but more than that, we were expecting close to 1,000 finishers, and for a mountain race, I mean, that's next to Pikes Peak and Mount Washington, there really aren't any bigger mountain races in the United States. So that's a big reason why we brought, you and your company in to time the event. Well, we knew that you guys were going to do an absolutely amazing and professional job, and you did.
Well,
but it was more than we were going to be able to handle by ourselves. Let's face it.
Well, when you start having 1,000 people running up a hill, going to the summit of a mountain, your concern shouldn't be, if they have as an event director, as you are, your concern maybe shouldn't be, do they get a time? It should be, are they healthy? Do they need medical treatment? Did they get lost? There's some other more critical things on your plate. And so to offload some of the more technical stuff that is probably a good idea to concentrate on the health and wellness of the event and the spectators. So,
yeah.
Or the runners rather, and spectators for that matter.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. And the size of our events now are such that it's easy enough for us to hand time them. But I have nothing but very positive things to say about your timing.
Well,
company. And I would strongly recommend you guys for any event that's looking to subcontract out their professional timing. In my opinion, you guys are the best.
Well, we appreciate that. I know it's funny talking about the acidotic events that we've been a part of, and lucky to be in a part of. I'm the oldest guy that works for us, and we have a bunch of young guys that love the outdoors. And one of the things that makes acidotic racing unique and amazing is that acidotic always finds venues that are like, you're just happy to be alive there. You look around and you say, this is this doesn't get much better. Having our timers and our team, our employees going to the summit of a mountain, looking around. Now it's been lucky. It's only been good weather. I think there's good karma there, perhaps. Some Tibetan charm coming our way on this stuff. But there's a lot of great opportunity to sit on the top of a summit and see people achieving their goals. And we've never really had a hard time getting our team to opt in to work that day, because there's nothing better than being the top of Loon or Waterville or Cranmore and seeing what God has created in the great state of New Hampshire, for sure.
Yeah, and that's absolutely the feedback that I have received from your crew as well. John, as running specific race directors, we're all basically looking to tap into the same or similar participant pool, right? I mean, there's only so many runners in New Hampshire or throughout the region, I should say. And as you know, the event calendar here in New Hampshire is really quite busy. Now, that's a great thing for participants, because on any given weekend, year round, there's a lot of events to choose from, whether they're local events, in your town, or more regional events. But that can also be a challenge for event directors with a really busy event schedule. John, how does Millennium Running differentiate itself from events, from all the other events that are out there?
Those are good questions. And, we are lucky to live in New England with just an amazing plethora of running and racing opportunities. I mean, Chris, when you think about this, you have the city of Boston and the Boston Marathon. Obviously, that's the big daddy of them all in terms of it's the most historic, famous race in the world, perhaps, arguably. And to me, I think it probably is. You have mountain races like Loon and Cranmore. You have, you can run along the seacoast like the Falmouth Road Race. And, but you have 6 New England states. You can be in Providence, or you can be in Burlington, Vermont in a matter of hours, or Portland, Oregon. And you don't have to go very far to find an awesome opportunity that is just, you look around and say, this is a great place to run. So we are lucky in that. We're also kind of lucky that there's a population density to support the number of events that are out there. We like to say that, you alluded to our Millennium Mile. People aren't driving very far to get to a 1 mile road race. You're not going to fly across the country for a 1 mile road race. However, if it's a marathon, you might do that. Our Manchester City Marathon that we produce in Manchester, New Hampshire, had 48 different states and provinces represented as from its participant pool. So in some ways, people were flying in from all over. Not the case on a New Year's Day 1 mile race. It's a radius of maybe 30, 40 miles to get there. But in reality, when you look back over the course of time, and I've been doing this for 11 years, in my 12th year doing it actually. When I look at the average age of a participant, it was 43 and a half 10 years ago. It's now 43 and a half 10 years later. So what's interesting about our pool of athletes, pool of participants, is they're the same average age. They're just moving through the spectrum of events. And one of the keys to that, I think, in what we've done is we've created events that has some that have a very low barrier to entry, be it a 1 mile downhill run, just the opposite of Loon. You alluded to the national championship in Loon. That's hard. You're running, 6-7 miles, or Mount Washington road race, 7.7 miles uphill. Holy smokes, climbing 4,000 feet. That's not for the faint of heart, so to speak. I alluded to the Boston Marathon. You're in 26.2 miles from Hopkinton to Boston. You got to train for that. Our Millennium Mile on New Year's Day, you could wake up that morning after a hangover and say, you know what, today's my day to start running or walking. And it's a 1 mile downhill race. What's your excuse, right? So we've created a number of events that have a very athletically low bar to enter. And I think that's part of the key for two things. One, and again, we can get into some other things. We have a store here, a running store, much like a Fleet Feet would be if you're nationwide, right? Running specialty, or marathon sports if you're at the finish line at Boston. We have people that come in our Millennium Running store, and the first thing they say is, well, I'm here to get running shoes, but wait, I'm not a runner. It's almost intimidating to some to be a runner. It's almost intimidating to some to say, hey, I'm going to run I can't run a marathon. I can't run it's self-defeating on some level. They don't, as you said, they're maybe not as into it or committed to the sport, but there's a huge population of people that just need to start moving more. And this as a fitness guru, as you are, just getting stronger, becoming more cardiovascularly fit, physically fit, mentally fit, emotionally fit, all those things. Fitness is collective, but doing a 1 mile downhill race to walk and start on the pathway of good fitness, that's part of it, of getting this population of sedentary people moving again. The second thing we did on that was, other than making them have a low athletic bar to entry, is making some of them sound fun. There's a T-shirt that we've sold, and it was a phrase going back to my high school days. Is we had shirts that said, "My sport is your sport's punishment." and when I say that,
It's
growing up, if you played football or baseball or basketball and you screwed up on the field or on the court, coach blows the whistle, take a lap. You're doing suicide sprints or whatever they're called. Maybe not the best name to call them, but you're now running as punishment. And I think too often that impacts people's view of the sport as a negative thing, as a punishment, where in reality it's anything but that. And you just have to get over the hump of then making it fun, making it feel like you want to do it more, because you get those internal feelings of accomplishment when you're done. But the second aspect is making some of these events have an enjoyable side to it. So entertainment value, just other things along the way that make it fun. Some of it is the post-race beer, to be honest with you. It's like, hey, celebrate your accomplishment with a post-race beer, things like that. So some of our events have a a party, a post-race party perspective where you can come, hang out with your friends and family that you did the event with and enjoy the day. So, our Shamrock Shuffle is only a 2-mile race with a beer at the end at a bar. Sounds easy to me. People say, wait, you only have to go 2 miles and you get a free beer? Sign me up on that one.
So it's right. So it's likely the party lasts longer than the actual race.
All the time. All the time. So, and then the third aspect of some of those shorter events, right? It appeals to a family. And you alluded to my family running the Millennium Mile. My 11-year-old, if it were more than a mile or 2 miles, he would say, I'm not doing that. Little kids running very far distances isn't quite they should be playing soccer and basketball and baseball and, gymnastics, all sorts of other sports. They can run long as they get older and more physically mature. But these shorter distance events, like a 1 mile, 2 mile, 3K, even 5K, allow for family participation. And when you see families participating in a themed event, one of the fun ones we do is a trick or trot 3K. So like a turkey trot, but trick or trot Halloween themed. People dressed up as Spider-Man and whatnot and running with their family, the superheroes running together. That's part of the appeal of introducing the sport to more people, families, low bar to entry for physicality. And that's a big part of what's keeping 43 and a half being the same average age, because you're introducing more families to it as they progress from being a college kid to a young adult professional, maybe having a family and then staying part of the sport. But then at the same time, one of our most competitive age groups we have right now is our 80 to 84. These guys are amazing. They're still doing it. And maybe because they started when they were in their 40s.
Yeah. So, I think that's a really interesting perspective on how to grow an event management company in general, but a running specific event management company. And that is, at least what I'm hearing from you, is that your business model wants to make sure that you are taking care of the back third of the field just as much or maybe even more than taking care of and catering to the front third of the field in terms of finishes. Because there are a lot of event management companies who really focus on the elite athletes, and it's all about the prize money and attracting the big names to the event as in order to facilitate the growth of their events, figuring that so long as we keep the elite athletes happy, the folks that finish in the back of the pack, they're going to come anyway. But it sounds to me, John, like you're almost flipping that around, and that your focus is at least equally on the folks in the back third of the field as it is in the front third of the field. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say to your point, maybe not equally, even more so. I do think our middle of the packers and the back of the packers, sometimes you don't know the story. Everybody has a story, right? That's what we talk about. Every participant has a story behind why they're there. And the woman that came in last in our Manchester City Marathon last December, the tears of joy she had finishing 7 hours and 11 minutes, and we let them finish beyond the cutoff time. Her 7 hour and 11 minute finishing time, her photos at the end I'd argue the guy that won cared less about all that than she did. And she was, dead last on that one. And as one of our announcers, Andy Shackett, says, it's our last champion, right? His last champion of the day is the person that is the caboose on there. But, I do think they care more about it. And I come at from the experience as a former professional athlete myself, former college coach. I had the opportunity to compete all over the world, all over the United States, and some of the most prestigious events that the sport has to offer, from Olympic trials to world championships to U.S. championships and all of them, NCAA championships. My whole goal in creating an events company was to provide at some level the grandeur of a really good running event for the average person getting out there for the first time. And that first time hopefully leads to a second time and a third time, and then a lifelong journey of fitness in one way or another. And that's, you know, sort of the same way as we look at things, even like off-road, you know, mountain racing that you've done. You know, today's new 5K runner is tomorrow's mountain runner. You know, Ginza through the what would you call that? The hierarchy of events and life cycle of a runner. So, yeah, we do care more about, I think sometimes we do care more about the average participant, or the backpacker than the winner, because they do have a story, and that's important to tell and hear.
Yeah, there's no question. And I think as an event management company, if you stay open to those stories, you know, those are the people that help grow your business.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, the elite runners they will always be there, and they're gonna come and participate. They may choose another event over yours because the prize money payouts are bigger, and that's okay. Truth is that you can grow a really robust, amazing running company and running community by making sure that everybody feels special, everybody feels important. And I mean, I think you guys have really done that in spades. You mentioned the retail store. So I think this is an important point to mention to the listener that Millennium Running is a multifaceted organization. You know, there are the events that you host. There's the retail store, and there's also a Millennium Running Club. And so let's talk about each of these, because I mean, I think that's what, for me anyway, that's what's really interesting about the business and the community that you've created. But let's go back to the start of Millennium Running, because from what I understand, although I've not heard the story, from what I understand, there's an interesting story. But let me preface it this way, John, that it takes guts to start a business. Right. That in fact, most startup businesses fail. I mean, I think the statistic is somewhere around 90% of startup businesses fail. Now, the ones that succeed, however, often have several important elements in place, including the right business model, a great team, a unique idea, and deep funding. But interestingly enough, perhaps the most important variable to success for a startup is timing. Now, not the kind of timing we were talking about before, but like good being timing. At the right place at the right time. So my question to you is, what did you see in the running specific market in 2010 that looked like an opportunity for you, right? In other words, what timing did you capitalize on at the start of Millennium Running?
Yeah, well, and you said we have a little bit of time to talk today, so this might take a while, Chris. So
let's go.
It's going to go before that, though. You know, the genesis of Millennium Running is really the event you alluded to, the Millennium Mile. The Millennium Mile is an event that I created with my best friend from high school, Matt Downen, and his older brother, Andy Downen. Now, the three of us were. This is in 1999. So going to the Wayback Machine. And this gets us to the turn of the millennium, hence Millennium Mile. The Wednesday before Thanksgiving, the three of us were at a bar in downtown Manchester, New Hampshire, talking about, because, you know, that's what you do when you're a college kid. You come home, you go to the bar, you meet all your buddies again, right? And so Matt Downen and I were seniors in college. I was at Michigan, he was at Wisconsin, came back to visit our respective families and hung out at the Black Brimmer in downtown Manchester, saying, what are we going to do for New Year's? Now, we've been hanging out as friends for a long time, going to different places, going to Boston, going to New York for New Year's Eve. If you recall, 1999, the world was going to shut down as soon as that old Y2K. I know a lot of your listeners are, you know, maybe in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Some of them know that. When I tell the story to people that are in their 20s, they're like, what's Y? And what's Y2K? It's a reference point that you don't get. But, you know, for those that might be younger, you know, the world was going to end because the computer systems weren't updated to account for the, you know, 2000s. It was all stopped at 1989, 90, 91. We had to recalibrate. So it was, you know, the electrical grid was going to go down. Well, the last place we were going to go to was downtown Boston or downtown New York for a big New Year's Eve party. If if the power grid shuts off. So we decided to invite all our respective friends from our own colleges. Matt down and went to Wisconsin. As I said, I went to Michigan. Andy down and went to Georgetown. Invited all our friends to a giant New Year's Eve party in their house in Hampstead, New Hampshire. And they had one of those cool houses that had the bar, the ping pong tables, the pool table, the jacuzzi, plenty of place for people. When we were younger, that's where we, crashed for the night. That's where the parties happened. And all of us being runners, we did the guest list of everybody coming up, and the number of All-American certificates between all the guests was 72 All-Americans were going to be at this party. And we're talking about, we had 5 of the top 12 men in the mile from the former U.S. championships. So we had Olympians, we had U.S. champions, we had All-Americans galore, and both men and women coming to this great party. And we said, wouldn't it be really funny to just jump on a bus and go to some road race with all these ringers, right? These fast guys, and some were professional, obviously collegiate runners for a bunch of them. And ultimately, the only race that existed, and it still exists today, I think it's like 45 years or longer, was the Hangover Classic. Hangover Classic is a New Year's Day road race. And that to us was, a bunch of college kids. We didn't know if New Year's Day was going to happen, nor were we going to be in any condition on New Year's Day after hanging out all night to go to a race. So we said, well, let's just do our own race then. Let's do one on New Year's Eve. So we came up with the idea, and we mapped out some, we could do a 5K, we could do a half marathon. Well, in reality, we actually said, you know what? We have all these great athletes. Let's just do a mile. Call it the Millennium Mile. That'd be great. We found a downhill stretch of road. I'm going back 1 second. We had done some research. There had never been a sub 4-minute mile run in the state of New Hampshire at that time. So indoor track, outdoor track, on the roads, nothing. It's one of the few states at the time that didn't have a sub 4 in its category. And so we have all these guys, many of whom had run sub 4 anyway. Let's do a mile. And so we said, let's do it. And then we said, well, you know what? It's cold. It's December 31st. Let's find a downhill mile. Make sure we can do it. And so we found a downhill stretch of mile from my high school down 1 mile south of that, and it was pretty good downhill on that. And we had all the guys show up, and that year I think 7 guys broke 4 minutes. It was the first time it had ever. We had 120 some odd people register. 70 of them were going to the party. I think the entry fee, we collected $5 cash or check, and had a whole bunch of people run the Millennium Mile. Donated, maybe $100 to charity from the event, and some of the extra food and water that were donated, we gave those to the homeless kitchen. And the news media got a hold of it. Local news media for us published results, and there were the TV camera because it was the first sub 4, and it was a lot of fun. And that was the Millennium Mile in 1999. If I fast forward, now of course Y2K never really happened. It was like everybody was fine. We
all survived, right?
We all survived. A little hungover next day, but we all survived. And we had a great party. We earned enough money to buy a keg, so that was great. If I fast forward almost a year later, I was at a turkey trot in my hometown, and someone in the running community said, I can't wait for your mile again. I missed it. I saw it on the news. I'm definitely running it this year. And I turned to my buddy Matt, who was there. I'm like, that was last year. He missed it. There was supposed to be a one and done. So those things were, we sort of talked about it as a group, and they were like, no, you should do it again. You should do it again. So we ultimately duplicated the event in year 2, and had a bunch of guys still run fast, and it was fun. And then it was after that I had moved back to my home state of New Hampshire. And I said, well, you know what? This little Millennium Mile thing, we had more people that ran last year. This was fun. It became sort of a pet project of mine. I was a professional runner for Adidas at the time. And I started college coaching at Boston College. This was a sort of side project. I was going to some road races anyway. I put flyers on cars. sort of old school guerrilla marketing. And then every year over the next couple of years, the Millennium Mile as a pet project, went from 120 people to 170 to 250 to 300. It slowly started to get better and bigger every year. And it was fun, and more people ran. We had people like Dina Castor come. Some of our friends, Dina Castor, Olympic silver medalist in the marathon, a friend of mine. She came to we had legitimately Olympians and medalists coming to participate and be part of the fun, usually because we had a good New Year's Eve party. That was really the crux of it. But, and it was, 10 years later. So you talk about like business plans and stuff. This was just a pet project off the corner of my desk. And at the 10-year mark, the 10th year, we had exceeded 1,000 runners for the first time. So we had year 10, like basically about 100 people per year, just growing. And that light bulb moment went off in my head at that point. We took proceeds from the event, and we made a scholarship fund in my mom and dad's memorial name that had passed away in that time frame. So it became a very personal thing for me to be able to give back. But at the same time, that light bulb moment was like, wow, this just made some pretty good money. We just had 1,000 people run on New Year's Day. It had moved to New Year's Day. I was like, there's something here. There's something there, so to speak. And the light bulb moment went off. And I said, well, if I did this, 5 or 6 times a year, I gave money to charity, get thousands of people running, this is a blueprint for something. So unlike a business plan or well-funded, it was, for me, it was a little bit of luck, a passion project sort of becoming that light bulb moment. And that was in 2010, 10 years into it, it had 1,000 runners. And then that created that Millennium Mile idea, created Millennium Running, that we created and formalized as a business.
So there had to have been, now obviously the luck is always a variable, John, but I really feel like we make our own luck, right? Oftentimes. What did the running event management landscape look to you? What did it look like to you in 2010? I mean, it likely wasn't as busy of an event schedule as it is as it is today. But how did you know that the success of the Millennium Mile could be translated to other distances, other venues?
Sure.
What belief did you have at that time, based on what you knew about the event management space?
Mm-hmm.
How was Millennium Running going to be able to tremendous success with the Millennium Mile? But what gave you the confidence that you could build out a business from the success of one event?
I didn't major in business. I was an architecture major. That's what I majored, as a scholarship athlete at Michigan. I didn't have the business background to say, hey, I could do this in the pro formas or, the building out a business plan. I didn't build out a business plan. I, kind of went on passion. And one of the things about business that I relate business in the world I'm in now a lot to athletics, because I think there's such a parallel between the two. And as a runner trying to win a national championship or become an all, like, it's about putting in the work every day. You don't win things in athletics and running specifically without putting in the miles, putting in the training, getting in the weight room, getting into the stretching, getting the body work done. There's so many different facets you need to hit on an everyday basis. And I kind of just look at the business venture of Millennium Running as a corollary to that. I felt like I was going to put in the time, put in the miles, put in the work, put in the effort, put in the research. Whether I knew enough about it, because I didn't. I was very novice as a business person, but I knew I could outwork everybody. I could put in the time. I could be, my architecture major did enhance my creativity, because that's a lot of my formal education was around creativity. And I think sometimes that has a lot to do with it, but I knew I would just put in the time and put in the work. So I don't know necessarily that I believed in the market but I believed in myself that I would make it work. Like, I'm going to put in the miles, for lack of a better term. And So that very first year in 2011, I created a company, LLC, and Google searched how to create a LLC in the state of New Hampshire. And my wife, who I alluded to before, Jennifer, she was a school teacher at the time. She was the breadwinner. I walked away from college coaching, which was my profession, and at the time. And I just said, I'm going to go all in. I'm just going to throw it, and I'm going to do this. And in that very first year in 2011, it was me, myself, and I say we a lot, but it was really just me, myself, and I, and hey, welcome to Millennium Running. We'll be happy to help you on the answer machine. And there was no we. It was so kind of make yourself sound more important than you are. And I worked at it that very first year. In 2011, I was able to produce 6 new races in 2011. So, or 5 new races, 6 in total. Each one of them built off the other one. But going back to the market space analysis that you asked me about, when you said, what about the landscape in New Hampshire? One, I'm a New Hampshire guy, so I know the state really well. I felt like I had the right connections with some of the media and newspapers and TV. So that was part of it. Number 2, I looked at, I grew up in Londonderry, New Hampshire, which is just the bordering town of Manchester. Manchester, New Hampshire is the largest city in the state. The largest race in the city of the state was the Cigna Elliott Corporate Challenge at the time. It's a corporate 5K business-based thing, and it had about 5,000 people. The next largest race in southern New Hampshire, which is nearby, had less than 500 people in it. And so my market analysis, the landscape was, man, you have a race that have 5,000 people, but you can't get more than 500 at another event. There were some ideas, not new ideas, but a turkey trot, Thanksgiving. Everybody, you run on Thanksgiving probably with your family, right? It's the most popular running day in the world, in the United States at least, and American Thanksgiving. And there was no turkey trot in the state's largest city. So I said, how do I create a turkey trot? An Irish themed road race wasn't I didn't invent Irish themed road races and green beer, but I knew that would work. I didn't invent a Santa Claus race. I wasn't the first one to ever do a Santa Claus race, but I knew there was a market space for that. So back in 2011, looking at those things, those were outwork people, be creative, and take advantage of the market gaps that I saw. And that was really what happened with that first year of just producing races. And each one of those events produced in 2011 all had over 1,000 people their first year, which was kind of got the motor running pretty good.
So we'll talk more about the events in just a moment, but sort of help me establish the timeline. When did this idea of I'm going to host events, right, as a business, how did it evolve into a retail store and then eventually a running club?
Yeah.
Help me understand that timeline.
So the running club came second. And this was, it was pretty early on, actually, in 2011 when we announced we were going to do our Shamrock event, and it's just 2 miles. You get a beer afterwards. There are 5 Irish pubs in downtown Manchester, and you can choose which one of the bars you go to get your post-race beer. And so as one of the promotions leading up to it, I contacted all the bar owners to arrange our beer ticket distribution and redemption at their great restaurants. And there's some really good restaurants in downtown Manchester. And at the end of the day, I said, we're going to do a training run for our Shamrock Shuffle. And the Thursday before, each one of the Thursdays leading up to that, we're going to do what we called the Millennium Social Club. And it was a training run just to get together. And I convinced a beer company to give us, some free beer tickets, and everybody, they paid, I think it was $20 just to go to 4 runs and get a beer and meet people and have fun. And we gave a t-shirt. and that was the goal, was a promotion for our Shamrock event. And then after that, man, we had like 30 people show up, 35 people show up, then 40 people show up. And the event was over, and people emailed me and said, "Can we keep this going? This is a lot of fun." So it became a Thursday pub run. And again, we're not the first or last people ever do a pub run, but that was it sort of evolved from a training promotional run at a bar to a weekly social club run. And so we started doing our weekly pub runs as part of what was then called the Millennium Running Social Club. And believe me, it got a little too social sometimes. So it was, those Thursday nights became long for some people. So we and that went on for, a couple of years. And although great fun, we met a lot of fun people, enjoyed ourselves. And then, and this is my wife's influence and our competitive instincts coming back around. As we started to transition to a retail store, we had more to offer than just the Thursday pub runs. It became a little bit more about the Tuesday workouts, the Sunday long runs. Now that we had later on we had a store, some of the nutritional things you could do, some of the resources we could put into what a running club looked like. So we renamed it the Millennium Running Club soon thereafter to be more inclusive of training, nutrition, all the things that come along with that level of a club.
Yeah, and so the retail operation came along third. Then, if putting these in line,
yeah. Well, everybody said, whatever you do, don't do retail. That's the dumbest thing you'll ever get to do. Everybody buys on Amazon.
but explain yourself, John.
Yeah.
Why get into the rat race that can be retail?
Oh, sure. And interesting story about that, Chris, is where that came around was early in my, I'd say fairly early, 2 years, 3 years into running my business. And we started producing more events, and we started timing our events, buying some infrastructure. I mean, to run a business, bringing on employees, there's a fair amount of liability that comes along with that, and financial liability is what I mean. And there's a couple of ways to grow a business, right? And either you just take off and you're uber successful right off the bat, and you're self-financing things as you're making money to put back in the business. And we did a bunch of that, but I wanted to expand quickly in a couple of ways and bring on more employees and bring on more infrastructure. And I went to a friend of mine that is chief lending officer at a bank. I said, this is our business. I had my financials that I had an accountant put together. I said, here's our year over year profit and loss. Here's our balance sheets. We really want to get a loan. We want a loan so we can, grow our business faster, bring on more people, have, infrastructure that we needed. And he looked at it, even though he knew me, he's like, this is such a non-traditional business. Events. What do you own? If a bank says, hey, you default on your loan, what do they repo from you? Do you need some cones? Do you need, an inflatable arch with your logo on it? You're going to get pennies on the dollar for that sort of stuff so there's not a lot of collateral there. From an event base, you own a database of emails, it's a very non-traditional business, quote unquote, from that perspective. And the interesting thing about that is he said something to me that stuck with me, and I didn't do it right away. He goes, but if you had like a store or a brick and mortar facility, that's what a bank will lend on. Because I didn't have enough revenue history, basically. And that stuck on the back of my mind. I'm like, man, that's crazy. Why would I do that? And but it stuck in the back of my mind. And a couple of years later, as we started to grow, and we took, instead of taking giant steps as a company, we were taking baby steps to grow within ourselves. And it was 6 years into the business that we needed warehouse space, we needed new trucks, we needed more stuff. And I came back around and said, what, I think now I know enough about business. I can write a business plan that allows us that flexibility. So it was really a facilities thing that we bought a building that has warehouse space, office space, and a storefront. And so really it became about, you mentioned before, being a business, I forget the word you said, but I like to say vertically integrated. We have online registration, timing, events, and retail. So all those things in the same parallel. And that's really where it came down to, as a matter of, we couldn't have trucks and trailers and box trucks in my garage at home. So I allude to my wife on this stuff again. Having box trucks and trailers in the driveway only lasts so long before, or when the 2000 Santa suits get delivered and they take up the garage space and it snows 3 feet. Where do you?
I think that's the story of any small event director. Their basement is full of plastic bins with race supplies, and at some point, you outgrow your own space.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah. So by my quick count, and you'll correct me if I'm wrong with this, but Millennium Running has, I think, 29 signature events.
Yep. Yeah, 29, which means events that we own as a business. We own and operate them. Yep.
Correct. Your signature events, and that making you the largest road racing event management company in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. John, how did you maintain quality while scaling your business? You went from one event, the Millennium Mile, to now 29 signature events. Now, to your point, you didn't do this overnight, right? But that being said, your business has scaled over the last 11 or 12 years. And there's always a challenge, of course, when you scale a business, to maintain quality, right? I mean, that's oftentimes what happens. We see this with businesses who grow too quickly. They lose something, and what they lose often is they lose quality. And in fact, part of it is they lose their soul. But how have you been able to maintain quality while scaling the business?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think from my perspective, scaling and quality is directly related to the team. And when I say that, I've been lucky enough to have people choose to work for our company, Millennium, as a company, whether that be on the retail side of it or it be on the event side of it. We're lucky enough to find people that, you could choose to work just about anywhere you want, right? Getting a job, sometimes you're lucky and you have a great job, but you can choose, if you're not happy, and find someone else to work. And most people are gainfully employed. We are lucky to have people that really care and are passionate as much as I am, sometimes more passionate than I am about certain things. But they work really, really hard, and they're dedicated and disciplined to producing a fantastic event or putting together a great retail experience for a consumer. They're very passionate about it. So I think that comes out, the scalability comes out because I can't do it myself. We have amazing people. And that's, someone once told me, the most critical part of a business is the people that work at that business. And I wholeheartedly agree that, the team of people we have, and, whenever I do an offer letter of employment or asking people to work for us, I always refer to it as our Millennium family. Granted, we are a family business, but these, you treat them, you want to treat people like family, and because I truly believe that the most important thing to the success of our business, and very authentically too. So.
Well, that culture, John, it always comes top down, right? I mean, the culture of your team is directed and guided by how you operate, right? And the things that are really important to you. Sort of a tangential story, but there is a tie-in, interesting tie-in, I think, to Millennium Running. Very recently, a Buffalo Bills football player collapsed on the field of an apparent cardiac event during the game. You had something similar happen at one of your events. Will you tell that story?
Yeah. Well, ironically, it's happened at a number of them at this point. You have enough participants, you have enough population base, and, we'll have about 65,000 people annually run events that we're part of. Odds are, just odds of health in the world, people are going to have underlying health conditions they don't know about. but going back to one of our events, the very first time it happened was something called the Snowflake Shuffle. It's a January event, and 99 times out of 100, 999 times out of 1,000, people are going to go out for a run and have a great day, feel good. That one in a million, so to speak, opportunities happen where someone doesn't feel good. Maybe they just got to get a breather. But in this case, a gentleman went down in cardiac arrest right in the middle of the race. And I got to be honest with you, to be in charge of an event where people were supposed to be fun, it's supposed to be enjoyable, have a good time. You got a band on the course, you got a beers at the end, you have this just a great environment. People are succeeding, their hands up in the air as they finish. But to be a position where someone is having a heart attack and potentially dying, and in some ways probably did for a bit. And it's happened at our Snowflake event. It's happened at our Shamrock event. It happened at our Mardi Gras event that we did. To have those situations is difficult for everybody. It's difficult for the participants and their family, or the participant, obviously, the family, it's spectators and staff and everybody. Part of it is definitely shaken when you have those. Just like that, just recently, the Buffalo Bills player, their whole team was shaken by it. So when you're dealing with life and death issues, there's nothing more important at the end of the day is making sure everybody gets home healthy. And it certainly changed the way we approach our life safety when we've had those things. You get better at stuff the more you do it, right? You learn from your mistakes. Not that there were mistakes in this case, but you learn how to be better at something.
And
that's part of it.
If we're talking about the same incident, is that the story that there happened to be a physician running the event as well? And that physician came upon the gentleman who was in need of some life-saving medical care. Are we talking about the same?
You sure are.
Situation?
You sure are. And there's about 2,000 people running in our Snowflake event, and this gentleman is about 1.5 miles into the race, halfway through a 5K, furthest away, and just starts to stagger a little bit. Pretty dense field anyway, but he goes down, and the person behind him that is the first on the scene is the chief cardiologist at Catholic Medical Center in New Hampshire. If you're gonna go down in front, in a race, who you want behind you is a chief cardiologist. So Dr. Capitalupa was his name, that was there to be first in the scene. And early intervention saves lives. With most medical things, but certainly in heart issues, early medical attention can certainly save lives. And he was Ray was survived it and had early, but was put in, quickly dealt with on site. Our medical team got there within just a matter of moments, rushed to the hospital, had a quadruple bypass, was in a coma, a medical induced coma for 2 days, and came out and then continued to he lost weight, ran more, has run a marathon, and now beats the cardiologist pretty consistently. So
that's a great script to the story.
And we say getting better and learning about this stuff. Our partner in that Catholic Medical Center, who I alluded to, we have another great partner, Elliott Hospital, some great medical partners that are part of our community. And CMC donated 5 AEDs to us after that. They donated them, and they go in each one of our vehicles because, in fact, where Ray had that heart attack, I was actually in the lead vehicle leading the race. Right, I actually abandoned the lead, let the police motorcycle take the rest of them, and I was on site, ironically, right at that, a split second after this happened. If I had an AED in my truck, in my lead vehicle that day, we would have had even better care. We had to wait for the the ambulance to dispatch to get to where we needed to be. But so now we have, because of great partners like that, have AEDs in every vehicle, and something happens at registration, there's an AED right there. So
and for the listener who's maybe not familiar with an AED, that's an automated external defibrillator. It ends up being a fairly unique piece of medical equipment, in so much as that they are actually designed for lay people to be able to operate. Now, there's some training associated for yourself and your team on how to use them, but the point of an automated external defibrillator is that these devices are life-saving devices, and they are spread out in the community. You find them now in airports and shopping malls. Of course, fire stations have them. Event management companies now, more and more, Millennium Running certainly being a leader here, now has them. But truly, and in fact, they have one at the gym that I belong to. Now,
well, let me tell you a story about that one too. While we're talking about these things, it's actually kind of amazing on this, right? So part of it is good communication, right? And you can go back to your days of in mountain stuff happens up in the mountains. You're somewhat inaccessible at some level. It's, you got to work real. You got ATVs to dispatch. I mean, you can get there, but it's not like it's on the street corner, so to speak. We had an event, our Mardi Gras event. It was a night event. It was actually on Fat Tuesday. And we had an athlete, again, go down about halfway through the event on course. And the first thing people do, there's an officer every block or course marshal every block. But it happened in between blocks. So the first thing that happened was telephone tag, runner down, runner down, runner down, runner down, got to the intersection. Police officer inquired what it was. Okay, I'll dispatch. We'll send them over. It went to us. The ambulance got from its location over to the location where the runner was down, and the runner had people around him. He was on the curb, slunched over a little bit, kind of breathing heavy. And the EMS people looked around there, already had, medical AED, medical. He had already been shocked. What actually happened was a quick thinking participant, a fellow runner. There was a fit lab right there. A fit lab is a gym nearby. Literally ran to the fit lab, grabbed the AED off the wall, and came back and shocked this gentleman before we could get medical attention to him. It was amazing. And talk about early medical intervention changes his life. I mean, there's some ways that was just luck, and a right place, right time for the AED, and a quick thinking good Samaritan was pretty amazing. So
yeah, that's also really that's also incredibly remarkable. But truth is, as an event management company, to have access to AEDs for your participants is without question a differentiator, right? Like, nobody chooses what events they're going to run because the event management company does or does not have AEDs, automated external defibrillators. But truth is that sometimes, that 1 in a million happenstance happens. And, to know that the event management company that is hosting the event that you are running happens to have life-saving equipment that can be delivered, to your side within minutes that's extraordinary. That's that's a story that needs to be told. And as you are telling the Millennium Running story, because I think that's so incredibly
well, and we hope we never have to use them, really, right? But just you plan for the worst and hope for the best is what you say. But I mean, that's not to say that having those defibrillators isn't an addition to it. We have some of the best medical people involved in our events. I alluded to a couple hospitals, but we have medical tents with medical professionals that are hired. And one of the interesting things about the event management business is so often people say, "Oh, thanks for volunteering. Thanks for volunteering." They'll say to a police officer as they run by, "Thanks for volunteering, holding up traffic." Well, they're not volunteering; they're being hired. And sometimes as an event business, you have to, you can't be a penny wise, pound foolish. Investing in your public safety and your medical life safety stuff is the best money that you'll ever spend, because that's if you don't have the right stuff, you don't have the right professionals, that shortcuts your entire operation in a heartbeat. And we've doubled down on that medical team at our signature events, the events we own and operate, to have medical tents with doctors, nurses, obviously ambulances on course, but both on course, the finish line, all sorts of places. And because I never, God forbid, we have that opportunity where someone doesn't survive but if it's their time to go. I had one gentleman tell me, he was training for our Shamrock event. That's one of the other races. We had a heart attack. He had already finished and was cooling. He was already having a glass of water and kind of went down afterwards. He had told me afterwards, he goes, I was training for 2 months for this race. He said, I got a glass of water, went on my back porch almost every run. This could have happened on my back porch and my wife would have found me hours later. The best place to have a heart attack is at your finish line. So, we're lucky to have those great people as part of the event for sure.
Yeah. I mean, as macabre as that sounds, there's no question about it. I mean, we used to talk about this in the hospital setting too, that the best place to have a medical emergency is within the hospital, right? Because there are times in which that same medical emergency happening in your living room as you sit there all by yourself results in a much different outcome than if you are in a medical setting. So, I would be remiss as part of this conversation, particularly as we talk about event management, not to mention the role and the lead that you took during the pandemic for all of us in the event management space. I mean, it was you and your work through the legislative process or however you exerted your influence in the event management space. Millennium Running events continued to happen during the pandemic. And in fact, other events had the opportunity to come back online much sooner than in other parts of the country. Again, because of your leadership, because of your sort of forward thinking about how do we work through this. My question to you, John, as it relates to the pandemic is this. Were there any changes that you made, right, from a race directing, race hosting standpoint that allowed you to continue your operation through the pandemic? Were there any of those changes that you sustained and carried forward as things began to open back up and become more quote unquote normalized? Any pandemic era changes that you continued forward?
Yeah, I think more, it's really, really cool segue there and to talk about some things that are, I think, really important. But globally speaking, I think the pandemic as an event management, as a business owner, even as a family person, right? It made you take a step back and look at what you're doing with a different lens. What does school look like for kids that have to be homeschooled? How do you manage your family life in that situation? What does that look like? Because it's not just doing what we did last year or doing what we did last week, or that from just a everyday mom and dad at home. You had to reinvent your lifestyle, where kids do homework at the kitchen table, where mom and dad can work and be remotely. So I think globally speaking, the pandemic allowed for us to have a very critical eye in how we had to reinvent the events. And, as you remember, the 2020-21 words of the year were like pivot and all that sort of stuff. But we had to look at every aspect of an event from top to bottom and analyze whether that was the right thing to do or how to move forward with that. And I think, what we kept over from the pandemic as we got back to normal was the philosophy of let's be critical of our own work and let's look at just because this is what we did last year isn't the right reason. It should be looked at with a very critical eye, because we always want to do right by the consumer, produce the right event, the safest event. And if there are things we learned from just looking critically, it would be, I think it's wholeheartedly looking critically and at each aspect of our event. It might take a little bit more time, but it's time well spent.
So, I mean, I mentioned you're a leader in the industry. So, from that position, John, from the position that you are in now, as you look forward to new advances or technologies or developments, what's next in the event management space, do you think? Where?
Oh gosh.
What's the next big thing, right? I mean, you know, at one point, you know, events were being timed with a stopwatch and a clipboard, and then chip timing became a thing. And that's just sort of one sort of aspect and element of the advancement and development of running as an event. Where do you think events are going, endurance events? Because I should say too that Millennium Running doesn't just host running events. You guys are also in the triathlon space as well.
Yep.
So broaden it out to what's next in the endurance event management space, do you think?
Well, I think, you know, when you get under the covers, a lot of the stuff, it's there's such an industry behind event management. And sometimes people are new to the sport, they don't understand or have access to the back end of, you know, who owns the event, who operates the event, why do they do it? Obviously, the charitable aspects of events are huge. You know, what you're running for, why you're running. There's a lot of there's so much to the running industry that is huge. But what I think you're going to see, and I'm starting to see it now a little bit too. You have these events that were started 25, 30, 40, 45 years ago. And they get to a point where the person, much like you and I, when we were starting events, you do it as a passion project. You do it as something, while you love it, you put your heart and soul into it. And there's some of these events that are starting to get to what you'd call their golden years. They're years of, you know, someone's got to carry the baton on this. And we were lucky enough to acquire an event just recently because of that. We were able to acquire the only half marathon in downtown Boston called Boston's Run to Remember. It's a half marathon on Memorial Day weekend. We'll be producing it in 2023 for the first time as a company. But it happened it's the 17th year of it. The race director is retiring. And he needed to hand the baton to someone. He didn't want to see those 17 years of amazing work and amazing charity work and thousands of runners every year. He wanted to see that legacy continue. So I think what you're going to see, one of the big things, I just think you're going to see a shift in the industry of events, you know, maybe even large scale events, just dynamically changing and who's in charge of them. And some events might cease to exist. Some events might flourish. But you saw that in the last go around. I mean, you have great companies like Rock and Roll Marathon, you know, Rock and Roll, and you're getting purchased by a venture capital group or things like that. Those stories happen. I think you're just going to see some changes within the industry that maybe the general consumer doesn't outwardly see, but as an event producer, there's more to the industry than meets the eye for a lot of people.
It's a good point. You mentioned VCs or venture capitalists. There's at least one that I can think of. I won't mention the name, but there's at least one event management company here in New England that is very much behind the scenes, is owned and operated by a venture capitalist group. The question is, do you think event management companies, do they need to be more transparent about who they are owned by, who they are backed by, or do you think that doesn't matter? In other words, Millennium Running it's a family business. You started the business, you own the business. Acidotic Racing, very much the same way, and that we're a small startup, you know, family owned and operated. Do you think event management companies owe their participants any transparency with respect to, you know, who writes the big checks?
Yeah, I mean, I would like to think that any business that operates authentically does, and whether is that. But it's one of my biggest pet peeves is going to a website and you hit the About Us section, and it just has a form to fill out and send your email in or whatever. I think having an authentic presence, and maybe that authentic presence has changed over time for some people. You know, if you're purchased, you know, say you're getting an investor or you're purchased by someone, you know, that's not public information, but I think authenticity is really, really important. And I do think that, you know, going back to your COVID question, one of the things that I truly believe about COVID was one of the most, you know, they say silver lining, right? Most redeeming qualities about that time frame as an event management company is we created a more intimate relationship with our customers. And what I mean by that is, more functionally, we did something called the time trial start, not too indifferent than what happens in stage biking or something like that. Some of the stages of Tour de France where they have one person going every X amount of time. We did that with our events. So, our Manchester City Marathon, the only marathon that happened in New England in 2020, had, what do we have, 2,200 participants across the board in the event, between the half and the marathon, the relay and the 5K. But each person got to walk the red carpet, get their name announced, and start their race. My role in that was I got to be the start line usher. So every single person that came up, I made sure they were in order. They were ordered by bib number. I gave them a fist pump, elbow. At that time, everybody has masks on, whatnot. But when they said, it's Chris Dunn starting the Shamrock Shuffle and get a fist bump, I had an intimate relationship with our customers. And I think that I hope we always have a degree of that. That's just on steroids in a way that, hopefully we don't have to go back that way. But in reality, it's something that I think was very, very special for us as a company. For me personally, I think while our consumers wanted and in some way needed to run for their health and wellness, I needed that too, for my health and wellness and where we were. So I think authenticity can't be understated in anything you do.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
So
just don't have an about us that goes to a page that says click here.
And don't bury the fact that you are actually owned by a venture capitalist group in San Diego, California, and you are sort of publicizing yourself as a New England-based event management company. The truth is that the big wigs sit in an office in Santa Clara, California. There's nothing wrong with Santa Clara, California. It is not Bedford, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
John, as we emerged from the pandemic and people began to get back to in-person events, the way that they remembered in-person events being, they also returned back to places of business like their local running store. Millennium Running being an example of that. This idea of as a business model, working to make sure everyone feels special, right, and that everyone is valued. How is that presented in the retail space? I walk into Millennium Running. What's the feel that I get as I walk into your retail space?
It's funny, going back to what's next on the big stuff, like in the world, when we first started thinking about producing a store, we have, some TVs and stuff that are up on the walls when you walk in. Because we have so much technology in our timing, one of the things that we wanted to do was provide everybody with basically an RFID tag, almost like Big Brother, right? Every time they walk in the store, if they're a member, their name pops up on that, like, welcome, Chris. Like, we wanted, whether it be like, hey, bring your bib number back in after the race and you'll get 15% off your purchase or whatever, a way to bring them back. That's what, so the big, maybe we do little computer, maybe the big thing that you alluded to before is like computer chips that are like, and that becomes your timing device. But that's going to get into a little bit more controversial stuff.
That's not that far-fetched, John. I mean, my dogs have microchips now. In theory, it's just a little small device that's implanted under their skin. All of a sudden now bibs go away, right? I can literally register by just passing my phone over my microchip and register for Millennium. Anyway, that's getting a little bit into sci-fi, but so that's cool. So I'm a member of the store. I'm a member of the club. I walk in, and all of a sudden now the TV monitors are welcoming me to the store. Right. But let's say I'm a new customer. I'm walking into Millennium Running, the retail store space, for the first time. What feel do I get as I walk into the store?
We're not a big box store. We kind of put things in like outlets, online outlets, big box store. We're running specialty. That's what, and your local running store. And going back to the cheers, you want to go where everybody knows your name, so to speak, right? the first part of our sales mantra of our fitology is what we call fitology, is our fit process. The first one, and probably the most important one, is consultation, is get to know the person. You're not just a customer. You're coming in here. What's your name? Introduce yourself. What brings you in terms of, what are you training for? Are you here? Again, someone will say, oh, I'm not a runner, right? But we have people that are nurses, that are in the medical profession, that are on concrete floors, Home Depot or Lowe's, that are walking miles and miles and miles on concrete tile floors. And they want a good pair of Hokas because they're super soft and cushy. Their knees feel better after a long shift. The idea is get to know your customer that walks in the door, and our retail team that works really hard, led by Melissa Murray, our manager, my wife, Jennifer. Hopefully they create an intimate relationship with that one-on-one customer. Cause it's not like you're at the, Black Friday sales at Walmart where you don't get to talk to everybody. It's a very intimate relationship. And we hope that is, I know our retail manager, Melissa, if someone walks in the door, she sometimes knows what size they wear because they've shopped there before and they know their name, and, oh yeah, I'll get this, how your kid's doing, type of thing. So, develop that great relationship is super important.
Talk a little bit more about fitology. Because that's when you visit your website, particularly the retail space, that's something that you guys put as sort of face forward. What outside of establishing a relationship with the customer, getting to know who they are, what else is involved in this concept of fitology?
Yeah, full fitology. I think it's a made up word I made up with brackets. It's fitology. It's like psychology. Although the funny joke that I just heard recently, like a relationship, it's psychological. One of us is a psycho, the other one's logical. Just don't ask which one. Come on. But fitology, the study of the right fit, right? And for me is getting the right product on the right person, and that's really what it is. And it comes in a 4-step process where number one is consultation. Get to know the person for who they are, what they're doing, what their goals are, what their experience levels are, and that might take 10 minutes of conversation. We're not talking about how much it costs or what colors you have. We're talking about you. That's number one is consultation. The next thing is starting to utilize some technology. In the old days, you had what they call a Brandic device, and that's the old metal thing. If you go to Dexter's shoes as a kid, you put your foot in the metal thing and it measures your feet, and you're flip it around to the other shoe or to the other foot. Now we have a lot more technology. So we have digital, 3D scanners. You'll put your foot in and it gives you a lot like anything nowadays gives you a lot more information. And information is king. The more you know about your foot, the more you know about your foot strike, the more we can help guide you in terms of what you need in a product, because not all shoes are created equal. They do different things. So from the static analysis, and the static analysis is the 3D digital imaging. And then we move to dynamic analysis. And that's where we move to the treadmill and see your foot in movement. So what's happening when you're walking or running? What is your biomechanics? And your strength is your specialty, specifically in fitness. And you know what good form is, what bad form is, and you teach your clients and people that are getting stronger to do it right. And your footwear is supposed to be there to help you do it right and correctly and safely. And the more you do it safely and correctly, the healthier you are, the more you can do it. Yeah. So strength in some of those problems are, hey, I need to be stronger, right? Others of them, I need the right footwear. And so that dynamic analysis is that number 3 part of fitology is looking at what your foot and what your lower extremities do in motion. And then the last part is then getting the right product based on all those, that information. We get the right product on your foot and make sure it feels good, and take it for a demo run and make sure it works. Those 4 things are almost impossible to do online. You can't do that online. It's just about impossible to do at a big box store or an outlet, because, like to say the kid with braces doesn't have the specificity that our trained staff has. So, all those things are really hard to do in other environments. That's, our fitology is really a personal relationship with our customer to get them healthy and in the right product.
Interestingly enough, each of those 4 points is is something that I do with some of my athletes. I mean, I'm classically trained as an exercise physiologist and have a background, at least in part, in biomechanics. So I certainly understand it. That said, I can sort of narrow it down, to the to a specific shoe construction and a specific drop range, heel toe counter. But that's as far as I can go. Like, they have to take that information then and go to a running store, a local running store, to be able to get in those shoes, because my best virtual workup is only as good as the athlete's ability to get those shoes on their feet.
Sure.
Right. And
and the other thing about it is, it's almost like the car industry, right? When my wife drives a Honda Pilot, when the new Pilot comes out, it might look different. It might feel different. They have a different body design, different trim work. Shoes are sort of the same way. When the new Asics Kayano came out a couple of years ago, it was vastly different than the previous version. I mean, vastly different, to the point that the Kayano wearer that wore 7 models in a row then said, no, this doesn't feel the same. They changed the last, they changed the upper. And that brand specifically lost a lot of its core customers. They went over to Brooks Ghost, which the Brooks Ghost is like the #1 shoe in the market. It fits right. It has the right last to it. And if Brooks ever messes with it, they're going to mess up a good thing. So, but every once in a while, they'll come up with a new, a new type, a new last or a design change that impacts the fit of it. And so to make sure that they're changing the drop height, or things are changing in the industry, going from a minimalist shoe to a maximalist shoe to, Hoka comes out and they say, hey, it gets all about the cushion. And then New Balance starts to jump on that train, and Saucony jumps on that train. So the shoe industry is changing year after year and evolving. And now, Chris, I mean, some of your athletes that you coach, I know they're probably getting into the carbon plated shoes. And you're seeing world records go down on the track because, kids and athletes are running in carbon, there's new technology in shoes that's being evolved that enhances performance in some ways. So sometimes the exercise physiologist or the podiatrist, well, they know the science, the medicine behind, or the biomechanics behind it. But sometimes the product that's not your core competency. And the actual, hey, then the New Balance 880 just came out and has a carbon nylon plate in it. That's different.
Yeah,
it feels different.
I don't think there's any question. In fact, I had an athlete that had just that experience with that running shoe model changing, and she couldn't figure out for the life of her why the new pair she bought just didn't feel the same. I think the other important point for the listener to understand is that as we age, our feet change as well. So even though, I always ran in such and such a model, and that always worked well, does not necessarily mean that model is always going to work well for an individual throughout their running lifespan. Our arches change as we get old. Our feet are older. Our feet change, which I think makes it really important to have a local running store that you can get a much more complete analysis of the shape and the volume of your foot and how your foot reacts in certain shoes. I think all runners would benefit from the fitology process. And again, don't go on the assumption that what always worked for me is always going to work for me in the future. We change as we get older.
Yeah. And that's like that for the events we talked about. That's what, keeping an eye on what we need to do to be better, and whether that be apparel, your training, your needs changes as you evolve for a lot of things, and footwear, running, exercise, nutrition, you name it, right? All that stuff is keep an eye on the prize.
Yeah. So let's finish with the third aspect of your business. Even though, as you sort of set up the timeline was actually the second part of the business, and that's Millennium Running, the running club. So there's lots of running clubs in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah.
What makes Millennium Running Club? What makes it special?
Oh gosh. Much like much like what makes our company special, the people that work for it. I think if you took a poll of the 400 people that join our club on an annual basis, that join, their paid members, I think the vast majority of them would say that it's the people. They love the club. They love the people. They love the camaraderie. I don't think you could put a price tag on good human relationships. We're lucky enough that our club and the structure of our club, between the Tuesday workouts or the indoor track workouts in the wintertime, the weekend long runs or the hill workouts, we're lucky enough that we create a framework for people to bond together over a healthy initiative of running. So much like probably any club, they'll say, the camaraderie and the people. I don't think we're different than that. I think we're just really, really lucky. Now, I do think one of the interesting things that we have, you mentioned being vertically integrated, we have our events, we have our store, we have our club. We always try to, connect the pieces to that to make it, allow our club members, our customers, our friends to have the best intimate relationship they can, whether that be at an event, in the store, or at a workout. So maybe being vertically integrated makes us a little bit more special. But it's really about the amazing people we have. And they bring a smile to my face every time I see them at an event or walk in the store. So we're lucky.
Yeah. So it's likely, John, with what you charge for a membership fee, and everything that you do and provide to those members, it's likely that club membership is a loss leader for you, right? So it's it's not necessarily a significant revenue line item for you, right? That's not. I suspect that's not why you do it. You probably charge a membership fee to at least offset some of the costs associated with it. So if it's a loss leader, right? If it's not a significant line item in your budget, then as a company, why go to the time and the effort and the expense to maintain a club? And I asked that question not because I don't think running clubs are important and valuable. Acidotic Racing was built on our club.
Sure.
It is the sort of full stop. It is the reason that Acidotic Racing became what it is from an event management company, because of the amazing people that wore our singlets and bike jerseys. So I'm very much an advocate and proponent of endurance clubs, and I know why it's valuable to me, but why is Millennium Running, the club, valuable to you if it's not necessarily, a top line revenue item for you?
Yeah, that's another good one. You're full of good questions. That's why you're good at podcasts, Chris. So let me tell you this. I think I'm going to use an example not of our club, and use as whether other clubs, other businesses, other products. And I think this came around influencers, when Instagram and social influencers became a thing. The idea that we pay, maybe this goes back all the way to Michael Jordan, right? And Larry Bird, they're influencers, they're paid athletes, and they get sponsored by a brand, Nike and Air Jordan, right? Now, Nike, Michael Jordan is now, synonymous with Nike, but, in reality, the brands are paying the athletes, or providing the athletes with something for them to then use them to perpetuate their brand or advertise their brand. Well, I look at our relationship with our club like ambassadors to our brand. Now, I've seen event companies out there, they have brand ambassadors, or I have, I use, Noon, for example, as a nutrition company. There's Noon ambassadors. Some have robust ambassadorship programs with their products or events. And I see those people having a requirement to post on social media X amount of times per week or per month, and do all these things that are built into a contractual agreement as an ambassador. And I think it's almost superficial, to be honest with you. Whereas a club that people pay to belong to, and they get a tremendous value from, they get camaraderie from, they get coaching from, they get incentive, that whether it be discounts at the store or they get experiences, they get experiences and they get a deliverable from that. They are the first ones to be the biggest cheerleaders for our brand. They share it on social media. They become our ambassadors in a way that's more authentic, and we're not paying them to do it. They're doing it because they believe that this is a product that they want to share their experience with. And I think that, I don't think you can put a price tag. You said lost leader. I love our club members for part of the reason is that they're the first ones. They're our early adopters. They're the ones that will share our new event, or come do this with me, or have a good time, or recruit other people to be part of the club. And I think it grows the community. So I think the club to me is the most authentic part of our business. One of the most authentic parts of our business. But when people wear a uniform at an event, just like they do the acidotic ones, or they go and run the Chicago Marathon and they post their picture of the Chicago Marathon running in a Millennium Running singlet, is pretty amazing to me, because they're not just posting it for themselves or the people in their club. They're posting it for their friends and family to see, and other people's friends and family to see. Social media is crazy when it comes to that, how viral stuff can get. But you can't put a price tag on that sort of advertising as a company. We were lucky enough we've had some very, very fast athletes run in as part of Millennium Running Club. We had a couple athletes compete in the Olympic trials in the marathon representing Millennium Running. We've had athletes be the first finishers from New Hampshire in the Boston Marathon representing Millennium Running. And, when Channel 9, ABC, WMUR TV interviews the first New Hampshire finisher, male and female, and they have a big black Millennium Running jersey on. To me, that's the best advertising you could ever get. It's on national or it's on regional, national television syndicate, on the news. That's pretty good. So,
but the reality is, as we talked about before, you have folks representing your brand. In other words, you have club members or ambassadors that represent the entirety of the participation field, from the elite athletes that have opportunities to stand on top of podiums and get on TV, and you have folks that are finishing in the back of the pack. It truly is. It's not an elite club. I think that's important for people to understand. There are some elite clubs in the region that have sort of performance requirements for membership. Millennium Running Club is not that case. It really is an every person's running club, which I think is incredibly important. And John, it says a lot, I think, about a business that people would pay to advertise your business for you. I mean, that's to me, that means you're doing something really, really well. In fact, it probably means you're doing some things, plural, really, really well. John, I want to give you the opportunity as we wrap up. I want you to have the opportunity to talk about something that I think is equally important to you as your business is, and that's your charitable giving. And that really rings true and comes forward, I think, when you follow Millennium Running on social media, is your philanthropy and your charitable giving. Talk a little bit about that, John. What types of things are you folks doing at Millennium Running from a charitable giving standpoint? And then also, where did that ethos originate from? Where did you get this feel and this desire and passion to give back?
Thanks for saying that. It's funny that, as we start to wrap up here, that's the last thing we talk about, because I often allude to that order of, importance in even the three pillars in which I kind of model our company after, producing great products and great events, advocating fitness and wellness to as many people as we can, and giving back, because you can't give back unless you do those other things really well, because sometimes you can't afford to. You can't, if you don't have a good event with a lot of people, there's not a lot of revenue to go around. So it's interesting how you come at it to the last one, but I think the same way, when people go and run or want to sign up for our Cinco de Mayo 5K, they say Cinco de Mayo, ooh, that sounds fun. Let me get a girlfriend to run with me. You get a couple of ladies, we'll all run together. Oh, and you get a Corona and a margarita when you're done. This sounds great. There's a band afterwards. This sounds great. They're not signing up for that. Or when I get a quarter zip with thumb holes, that's the other thing, or I get cool swag. They're not signing up for it because they see that the, Elliot Lindsay Skinner for cancer care at the Elliot is the official charity partner of it. That's not why they're showing up. They're showing up because it's fun and they want to have a shared human experience with someone else. And at the end of it, they realize, oh yeah, that was for a good cause. We donated some money to a great organization, and it gives them a little bit of self-worth on that. And it's interesting how you came out about it as the last one, because if you were the American Cancer Society producing an event, you might lead with that, right? We're a business, we're a for-profit business, but by our DNA, we are super charitable, and to the point where at right now we're $1.36 million in charitable giving. So we've provided that to local organizations, from a Cub Scout group to a cancer center and a hospital, to veterans, to Heart Institute, all sorts of different things. And it's interesting. Some of our organizations that have been with us are also part of the DNA of the event. We ask them to have a little bit of skin in the game, come out and volunteer, be part of it. And then, we'll give you guys a donation. We have a Cub Scout group, Pack 127. They've been with us from day one. They raised over $40,000 as a Cub Scout group. Like that's a lot of money for Cub Scouts. That's a lot of popcorn. And then there's other ones where, we have larger checks. We've raised over $100,000 for Veterans Count, a veterans organization here in the state of Hampshire. Like, those are real dollars that really matter to people. But, whether that be, getting new uniforms for a program that doesn't have the funding anymore, to, cancer centers. I mean, this is really important stuff. And we probably don't lead with it enough. We try to weave it in, and more because I think we want to make our events be about the participants and about their experience. So we try to weave it in as much as we can, but man, it's something that I'm super proud of. My wife is super. I think everybody on our team, when we say, we went over the, $1 million mark, last year, and then $1.3 million this year, we're going to be at $2 million soon. And to say, as a small family business, we've raised, distributed over $1.3 million. There's not a lot of people can say that about the business that they own or work for. So, we're super happy about that, and want to keep on, if we can get to 1 million, we get to 2 million. If we get to 2 million, we get to 5 million. So those are sort of the goals we put out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic doing good by doing well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's also, John, likely a reason that your employees have such loyalty to the business, because of that. Because it's more than just the budget at the end of the day. Let me ask you. Let me ask you this: how do people find out more about Millennium Running? So
Sure.
Interested in this. Where do people go to learn more about Millennium Running?
We'll go to like InstaFace or Snapchat. Go to all your social, go to all the things. Do a search of Millennium Running. But obviously, our website millenniumrunning.com is our digital face of our company that has all the website information you can ever get about us. And again, we're authentic. You see who works here. You see what they do. There's a bio of everybody. Some of them probably need to be updated, but we are who we are, and you can find us online at millenniumrunning.com. If I were to go back in time, the Millennium story is interesting in terms of its authenticity of how the name came about. But gosh, people can't spell it. There's two N's in Millennium, and that's the hardest thing. Try to spell Millennium after half our Google searches are wrong.
There's a lot of double letters in there. Yes, John.
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. If you maybe could have gone back and maybe made it something simple like Rabbit Run, right, or just something that didn't have so many darn L's and N's.
Yeah, right. Well, you can obviously you can find us at millenniumrunning.com and get on Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, all that fun stuff. That being said, my license plate is Run More. And if I had to go back in time, I would have said runmore.com, and that would have been it. Everybody can spell that one. But eat half, walk double, and we can just add Run More to that. That's what we should do.
So when this show is being released is in early February. So now here we sit in early February. What's the next event on your event calendar here as we sit in early February?
Football season is still, we alluded to the Bills game, that tragic incident, but football season's we're in the midst of this. The playoff hunt is on. The Pats still have a chance. My Michigan guy, Tom Brady, and the Buccaneers just clinched. So football season is here. I'm a big football guy. I love football. It's fun to watch. I'm glad my kids don't play it anymore. But our Super Sunday 4-miler, we have a football themed, one of the many themed events we have that make it be fun. We have a football themed Super Sunday 4-miler on, it would be the 12th Super Bowl Sunday, the 12th of February. That'll be here actually right across the street from our world headquarters here in Bedford, New Hampshire, at a restaurant we partnered with to have an outdoor snowy beer garden. Nothing like slushy Sam Adams when it's 10 degrees, and go for a good run. It's a good way to celebrate, what is like the equivalent of the turkey trots. You eat, you run in the morning so you can have a good meal. You go for a run in the morning so you can enjoy, a Super Bowl tailgate with your friends and family.
Well, truth is, here in the United States, Super Bowl Sunday is a holiday now, right? John, let's finish with this. Let's finish with a fun segment I like to call 3 random questions. All right.
This is fun. I like this.
I've got 3 random questions for you, John Mortimer. But the first question, actually, I have, it's not part of the random questions, is will you verify for the listener that you have not received these 3 questions in advance?
I have not. Oh yes, I have not received. These are new to me, and I'm taken off guard because now I got to think quick on my feet.
That's part of what makes this fun for me.
Let's go.
Is seeing how nimble people are intellectually. John, my first random question for you.
Oh boy, that just sealed the deal right there. Nimble intellectually.
You've done really well so far.
Totally gonna fail now.
Yep. So don't screw it up now, John. So John, you're hosting a group run.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you invite one VIP. Now that VIP may be someone from the past or someone from the present. Maybe this VIP is someone you know or someone that you've never met, but that you know of. So, John, who's the one VIP you're inviting to your local group run?
My local group one, it could be, I'm going to go back with my childhood best friend, Matt Downen, who was a guy that, helped start the Millennium Mile many, many years ago, and his wife, and he lived in Minneapolis, and would have him come back in and go for a good run together and relive the good old days.
I assume he doesn't live locally.
He lives in Minneapolis, so
so you don't get it. You don't get a chance to run.
Not only on a rare occasion. So maybe once every couple of years. So
very cool. Random question number 2 for John Mortimer is: did you have a sports hero or heroes as a kid?
Oh gosh, yeah, I 100% did. I was a little white kid from New Hampshire. But I desperately wanted to be Michael Jordan. He was 6'6". I was a little point guard playing basketball. I had a knee brace, even though I didn't have a knee problem. Used to try to play basketball with my tongue out, and until you got one of the chops and you realize you're not that good at basketball. But Michael Jordan was my childhood sports hero. That what a great transcendent player. So.
Did you have any running specific sports hero? Obviously, you went on to have a very illustrious career as a runner. Did you ever have any heroes or idols or runners that you looked up to?
Good question. Not really, because I got into running fairly late in life, and running isn't, you're not seeing running typically on TV every Saturday or Sunday like you do other sports, baseball, football, basketball, hockey. So I wasn't really exposed to running until I started becoming good at it in high school and beyond. So, I had some, the athletes, the professional athletes of my time, of my high school years, the Todd Williams or Bob Kennedys, guys like that I had an opportunity to admire from their accomplishments as an Olympian, ultimately became even some of my teammates. And I was on some US teams with some of those guys and ran with them, trained with them. So a lot of those heroes that I had as a younger athlete, I had an opportunity to really become friends with them. And even someone like Meb Keflezighi, right? Boston Marathon winner. He's a good friend of mine. And guys like that are running heroes they're a phone call away from me.
Yeah.
So I feel lucky to have had those relationships through the sport.
Yeah, right. Not everybody can say that they actually had a chance to not only meet but become friends with their sport or other idols. Last question for you, John, is this, and it's a fairly broad question, but I'll ask it anyways. I think you have a lot to offer here. What was the best advice you were ever given? And I I intentionally left that broad. I didn't say business related advice or running related advice because I suspect that you probably have had a lot of important people in your life give you a lot of really valuable advice and guidance. So let's keep it broad. What comes to mind when you think of that question? What's the best advice you were ever given?
I have a couple pieces. I don't know if they're advice or more they're idioms or things to live by that I think kind of goes with advice. It's like, how do you live your life, right? I think they're sort of broad too, but I'll go to an example of getting recruited by the University of Michigan, and my college coach that ultimately became my college coach, Coach Warhurst, a legendary coach, coached many, many Olympians. And he did a home visit with me, came to my house, met with my parents, and my dad said, what are you looking for most in my son? And most coaches, if given that same question that he gave, his leg speed, his work ethic, all different attributes around the sport. And coach said, I want a good citizen. And I took that as advice. And the other idiom I use all the time is there's no right way to do the wrong thing. Right. So between those two things, that's my advice that I'm taking from other people that I would probably give back is there's no right way to do the wrong thing. You always have to do the right thing. And like Coach said, be a good citizen. And if you're a good citizen, that means you're doing a lot of other things right. So those two things, I think, I'm meshing those two things together to be really good advice. So how about that?
I think that's a great lesson and an excellent way to wrap up. John, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Well, it's an honor to spend time with you. And I hope that, our conversations were something people enjoyed listening to after 1 hour and 49 minutes of fun. I'll do it again anytime you want.
I'd love to have you back on. John, thanks again.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate it.
John really is the best in our business. His efforts here in New Hampshire during the pandemic created policy that allowed running races to be held months, and in some cases a year or more, before other states resumed any operation of that outdoor recreation sector. And his charitable giving is an inspiration to all of us to do more and to give more. Once again, you've been listening to the Eat Half, Walk Double podcast. If you enjoyed what you heard, please circle back to the homepage and click the follow or subscribe button to stay up to date with all the new content. And of course, if you really enjoyed the show, please consider sharing it with your friends. I'll be posting some supporting media on my Twitter account at Coach Chris J. Dunn and the show's Facebook page at Eat Half, Walk Double, so make sure to check that out. And lastly, remember, the secret to living well and longer is to eat half, walk double, laugh triple, and love without measure. Until next time.